Right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. Excited that you're here with us. We should have some fun music next time.
Yes, that would be good. We are recording the session, so if you have friends or people that you know who are like, yeah, we'd like to go, but we can't make it because of sports or traffic or late night at work, no worries. Just reach out to us and we'd be happy to share the recording of tonight's session with you.
We are also very happy to take questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a row of icons. Click the Q&A button and then feel free to ask questions. We will try to answer them throughout, and then we'll save some time towards the end as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the one kind of weird thing about a webinar as opposed to a meeting. Lots of times in the meeting, we actually see everyone and everyone's happy face and the questions get asked in real time. Here at the webinar, it's a little bit less connective. You have to chat it into us. So apologize about that, but that's the way we have to do these things. Otherwise, it'll be a 6-hour meeting, which I'm sure you don't want.
That's so true. All right. Well, Mike, we're right at the bottom of the hour. Do you want to go ahead and get started?
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you very much for having us here this evening. Very grateful for the Lake Travis PTO to invite us in to give this presentation. I don't know how many years we've done this in a row, Emery, but it's become a tradition.
Our 5th year.
5th year, that's crazy. I'm getting old. That's no fun. But anyway, we're super glad to be here. Definitely, if you'd gone back to the original presentation 5 years ago, you would see massive changes because of COVID and test option and all sorts of everything in between has happened in the world of higher education. So we're really glad for you to be here with us tonight to dive into some of the various little nooks and crannies of applying to college. And with that, Emery, I'll go ahead and turn over to you to introduce yourself, and then I'll come back in and we'll get kicked off.
Great. Do you want to advance the slide?
So, here we go.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Hatfield. I'm one of the partners in College Inroads. I live out here in Lakeway. I live here, I give here, I serve here. I'm on the board of the Lake Travis Education Foundation and have recently rolled off the board of the Lake Travis Chamber of Commerce. So hopefully we'll be coming back on there. College Inroads started by our founder, Mr. Mike Davila. I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. He and I joined forces in 2019 and incorporated into College Inroads. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Texas, Hickam, and I love doing business with our clients, running into some of our kid clients at Torchy's or in line at the grocery store at HEB, etc. So really, really happy to be here. Believe it or not, we started with 2 people. It was me and Mike, and we kind of split everything in half. And now we have a team on this screen. You will see myself, Mike in the middle, and then Dee Kohlhoff, who is our client relations specialist. We also have an admin team. We have educational consultants. I think there's, how many, Mike? 7 or 8 now?
Yep, we have 9.
9 educational consultants. We have 5 application specialists. We have essay specialists, financial aid specialists, learning differences specialists. So we really do have a team that surrounds us. Again, we started in 2009 as a sole proprietor. We incorporated in 2001. That's when Mike and I joined forces. Our home office is here in Austin, but we do serve clients across the continent. So we have clients in Mexico, we have clients in Canada, we have clients all over the United States. To be honest, accidentally. A lot of our clients come from Lake Travis, again, because I live here, give here, serve here. Between Mike and I, we now have over 30 years experience in our industry. Boy, that ages me. That makes me feel very old. Again, it used to be me and Mike did everything all by ourselves. We now have 28 on our team who support us and the work that we do with our students and families. A plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. We've won lots of awards through our local Chamber of Commerce, and we presented a couple of times at some of our industry national conferences. So that's just to let you know who's talking to you today and that we do have a little bit of credibility. Mike, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thanks, Emery. I'm Mike Davila. Again, really happy to be with you tonight to talk about something I really love, which is higher education. Although if you'd asked me if I loved higher education in my undergraduate experience, I probably would have said no. I went to the U.S. Naval Academy and got yelled at for 4 years. So that wasn't an entirely fun experience, but I did survive that. I went out into the fleet. I came back and taught at the Naval Academy for a couple of years. I got recruited by Merrill Lynch before 9/11 and trained with them, was with them for several years, learned a lot about finance. In 2003, I became an educational consultant. In 2006, I went back for a higher educational administration master's at UT. And I just have thoroughly enjoyed working with students and the parents trying to get ready for college. And college has radically changed since we as parents went to school. And that's going to be one of our themes tonight, is to kind of unearth some of those big changes for you. With that being said, what are we going to talk about tonight? So the first thing is where's the crystal ball? What's going to be happening in the future? We'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about those old cognitive maps that we might be carrying around as parents. We'll talk a little bit about college costs, return on investment, how to keep going forward in the process. But first, hey, what's happening in the wild world of U.S. higher education? There's tons of stuff. The last couple of years, you guys have all seen and felt the effects of the test optional movement. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. Certainly, there's lots of effects of COVID, kind of the after effects of learning on campus. So I was talking with some colleagues today about writing and how writing has changed over the last couple of years, with students having to learn from home for a year. It's very, very different. If you were a fly on the wall in a mental health center on any campus, you would see way more students using those facilities now than perhaps in years past. There's a lot of stress happening. So super common. If it's happening at home in high school, it's also very common. So we want to address that and just acknowledge that. There's definitely a huge demographic shift that's going to be happening in the next 2 or 3 years that every vice president of enrollment at any college that's worried about enrollment is looking at with a really keen eye. There's a cliff of students where there's going to be fewer students going to college in the next coming years. And all that is exacerbated by pricing, inflation, and this tuition discounting scenario that's happening at many private schools. The national discount rate is up at about 53%, meaning that the average college is advertising, let's say, a $50,000 price tag, but they're only getting in through the door a little bit over half of that for net revenue. So that's a big deal for colleges. They're worried that that bubble is going to burst. There is definitely an increased lack of diversity in the applicant pool. So if you're a student of color, if you're a student in Texas and you want to go to New York State, if you have some sort of diversity to offer, that can actually work very much in your advantage, depending on the schools you're applying to. If you also talked with writing centers on campuses or tutoring centers on campus, you would see that there is starting to become an issue with student preparedness for college level work. So it's important for our students to, as best as they can, really take advantage and leverage the great resources that Lake Travis has for you in terms of AP, dual credit work, things of that nature, on-ramps at UT, et cetera, et cetera. Student indebtedness, I mean, that's definitely been in the news lately in terms of student loan forgiveness. So that we're just going to keep tuning into. And then finally, the relevance of a college degree is being questioned. But, you know, we've seen this over the course of nearly several decades of happening, and still people are demanding, and employers are demanding that people come out with skills, abilities that they feel that are best grown in college. So those are some really big picture stuff. And we're going to start drilling down now to thinking about what college might be looking for. College admissions offices are looking for now more than ever. Evidence of resilience, perseverance, things of that nature. Why? Because it takes a lot to get through the college experience these days. Creative problem solving skills, the ability to be flexible in face of changing situations, indications of intellectual ability through transcript, essays, the teacher recommendations, other things. I was sitting with a student the other day and they said, I don't know if this matters, but, one year, not too long ago, I actually read 52 books. And I was like, really? 52 books? And you're like, yeah, I have a spreadsheet of them. I'm like, yes, that is a definite indication of intellectual curiosity, the ability and the want of learning and reading and such. So it's a big deal. Definitely colleges are looking for people who can pay closer to full freight for the school experience. So yeah, if you're a VP of enrollment, you have to balance that out, because if you accepted all people who are full pay families, you would probably lose out on diversity and a lot of other things in the freshman applicant pool. So they won't accept just all people who can pay, for sure. And then the grand question that a lot of folks want to know is, what about SAT and ACT stuff? I know that has been a concern of people, and I think almost to I don't want to say the detriment, but there have been so many people talking about test optional that sometimes we have to think critically about that. Is that really what we want to do for admissions, especially if we're looking at more selective schools? So let's dig into that just a little bit. So the SAT and ACT, is it important to the colleges? Well, if you talk to most admissions professionals, they would say we can do a really great job, and especially since COVID, on figuring out, will a student really be successful in our school based on things like, what kind of high school did you go to? How did you score in high school? What kinds of grades did you attain over time? Which courses did you take in relation to what's offered? So the SAT, ACT stuff may be kind of left out of that because it had traditionally been a sign of native intelligence. And at one point, it was actually a discriminatory tool that was used to screen people out of the Ivies many, many moons ago. So it will definitely matter school to school whether or not the college will even look at these tests. This year, schools like University of Florida, Florida State, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Georgetown, all of these types of schools have required the SAT and ACT. So where 2 years ago, almost everybody was test optional, there's definitely more schools starting to come back to the whole old way of doing things with these tests being required. Should we study for these tests? And my answer has always been absolutely yes. If you're going to attempt one of these tests, we should actually put our best foot forward and study. Even if it is the junior year December SAT, we should go for it and study for that exam. Who knows, it might actually be the best iteration of that exam for you. So definitely we want to do that. 20-ish hours, maybe give or take, would be a good rule of thumb. A student asked me today, hey, what do you think about full-length practice exams? And I'm like, yeah, those are great. I would do 4 or 5 of those if you have the time. And I know some people are heavily involved with lots of extracurriculars, and me saying 4 to 5 full-length 3-hour exams might make you cringe. So totally take that with a grain of salt. If you're up against the wall, just doing some of them is really, really nice. How many times, Anne-Marie, would you say a student should attempt these tests?
So I would say at least twice. I mean, our philosophy is, even in the lens of test optional, to go ahead and take the test at least twice. Most schools will either take the best sitting or will super score. Not every school, in fact, not a lot of schools will ask for every single sitting that you took. So I'd say probably 2 to 3 max.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb. I mean, I've had parents say, well, we could take it 9 times. I'm like, no, that's you're heading for burnout. That's craziness. So 2 or 3 times, fantastic. Most colleges, kind of going back to the whole old cognitive map thing, back in the day, there were regions that would only accept the ACT or the SAT. In this day and age, it doesn't matter which test we actually go for. There are equivalency charts all over the place. Colleges get it. So either test. Some people are going to be better at the ACT because why? It has a science section on it. A student may be more comfortable reading, interpreting graphs and things of that nature. Some people will do better on the SAT because it gives you a hair more time to answer some of the questions, et cetera. So it just matters, student to student, which is the best. In our practice, we have a diagnostic test that tells us which of these tests is actually going to be a better one for the student. And then when should we start actually taking these tests? Most of the time, most people will, students won't start actually, in earnest taking the SAT until the latter part of the first semester of junior year. That's usually the absolute earliest the student is actually going to go for the real SAT or the real ACT. Not talking about PSAT 10 or any of that stuff at this point. So that's usually kind of when people start getting on that conveyor belt for standardized tests. All right, so how to prepare, books, online resources, proctored courses, one-on-one. Again, to me, it doesn't matter how we prep. Meet the student where they're at. If they're definitely self-motivated, absolutely good on their own, perhaps a books or an online course might be just fine for that student. The student needs more support, needs more feedback, needs to have some accountability. That's when we start seeing the more higher priced options, the proctored courses, and the one-on-one. Again, I'm not tied to any of these. I think they're all valid, but it depends on how the student really wants to approach this test and where they are with their mental processes.
Hey, Mike, we had a question come in.
Sure, go ahead.
Somebody wants to know what's a good SAT score to be accepted into UT Austin for computer science?
Oh, for computer science. Well, the 1600, how's that? No, I'm just joking. It's for a school like natural sciences at UT. I hate to say this, but a lot of it depends on your, it's not only just scores, right? Because students that go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Duke, they're self-selecting. All of these students are going to come in with probably 750 or above math scores, okay, on the SAT. And that applies to UT Austin as well, especially if you're outside of the top 6%. If you're not aware, just to rewind a bit, if you are applying to UT from the state of Texas, if you're within the top 6% of a graduating class, you're auto accepted into the university, not necessarily into the college. In this case, we're talking about the College of Natural Sciences. So yeah, I mean, I would say a 750 math or above, and then something pretty comparable on the English side, honestly. So that's just me. I'm not an admissions person at UT. But that kind of gets us in the zone, and then a lot depends on what have we done. What's our resume look like? How have we performed in classes? What's our rank? There's a myriad of other things that are going to go into an admissions decision, not just the score. But I think this brings a good point, Anne-Marie, in that a lot of times people are looking at more selective programming, and that's the reason why we do not want to neglect these exams. Because if we are trying to get into Georgia Tech, most of the people who apply there and have a really good chance of going there are going to, submit scores. They are, so if we're trying to get to Blinn, or if we're trying to get to SFA or a school that's less selective, maybe it's a non-issue. But a lot of people start to get focused on those really hyper-competitive programming, and it's just, again, another arrow in the quiver to gain acceptance to some of these more selective programs. Okay, so what if the SAT, ACT isn't our thing? The test optional list, if you're interested in it, is at fairtest.org. And clearly this is a tiny snapshot of all the schools that are on that list. There are over 1,000 four-year schools that are test optional, which is great news for most of us, including places like my alma mater, Princeton, Smith, Lawrence. These are really, really great schools. Most of these were test optional even before the whole pandemic hit, or many of them were. Upcoming SAT and ACT dates, if you're taking notes, you can take notes on this, or we can send you a copy of the slides when we're done. Just email us, let us know. But here are the upcoming dates. There's a couple left in this year for both the SAT and the ACT, and I just listed a couple for the second semester of junior year, February, March, and April, May. So don't fret, there's tons of other ones that will be over the summer of next year and beyond. Especially if you're a junior this year, you have lots of opportunities. What about learning differences? A couple sessions ago, parents said, hey, we'd like to hear a little bit about learning differences in college. So we said, sure, we'll add a slide to that. One of the key factors that I would put forth is that 504 and the IEP programs themselves do not translate into the college world. So those are high school only specific programs. So if we need accommodations in college, that has to be negotiated and talked about and finalized through usually the Disability Services Office on campus. Okay, and so many times that office wants the diagnostic testing to be current, usually within 3 years of matriculation to their college. So if we got diagnosed with a learning difference back in 6th grade, that's going to need to be updated in order to retain any of the kinds of services and things that we have been taking advantage of in high school to have that translate into the college world. So accommodations for the SAT and ACT, if that's something that we're looking for, you'll want to work with a guidance counselor there like Travis. And then there's 2 websites I list there that have all the hoops that have to be jumped through in order to get extra time, to get time and a half, to get a quiet testing environment, et cetera, et cetera. And then the question is, should we talk about our learning difference on our college application? Great question. For some people, that's very central to who they are and what they are doing in life, and that may have a place on the college application. Many, many times, though, it is not something that has to be disclosed, and many students choose not to talk about it, which is absolutely their choice. If you go into the college environment and talk about, hey, I struggle with ADHD or, some sort of depression or whatnot, those sorts of things are fine to talk about with the Learning Differences Office, because there is literally a firewall before or between the admissions office and that disabilities office. So that's fine. If you put it in your college application, though, it can be a red flag. So just be careful with that. Very much give it some consideration. There are some schools out there like Beacon, Landmark, places like that, that's their jam. They are used to having students come in with learning differences. So that it's not even a worry to put that on their application. So it just matters who your audience is and what you really want to present. Okay, the college list, talking a bit about that. There are only 2,400 four-year schools out there in the United States to choose from. There's lots of options. We recommend 8 to 10 colleges for applications, okay? Which, I don't know about you, Emery, I did 2. I mean, I think you did 2 or 3, right? 3, yeah. That's it. So again, this world has really changed. Students are very, very portable these days, which is great. 8 to 10 is usually great. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yeah. Amory, what are some exceptions to the 8 to 10, kind of guideline?
I would say musical theater for sure. Most of our musical theater kids are going to apply to 20 plus universities. There's lots of different layers to that system with the odd pre-screens and the auditions and all of that. That's a big one that comes to mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Recruited athletes, Ivy League, admissions. And there may be a couple times when you apply to 2 or 3 or 4, and that's it too. But generally speaking, if you're kind of in the middle zone, yeah, 8 to 10 is a good number to kind of shoot for. But before we apply, we really kind of will look at the other side of the equation. Like when I was in the military, we would always do intelligence analysis of what was happening, what situation we were going into. So in this case, let's look at the Selective College Admissions Office. Okay, just generically, the Independent Education Consultants of America does a survey of I think it's about 300 really selective private institutions each year, and they come back with the top 12 things that these colleges are really looking for. The first is rigor in curriculum, which is kind of a yawn, right? Because we'd all expect that, right? How many APs, IB, did we do dual credit? Did we do early college start? Did we, take advantage of on-ramps or whatever? Basically, they're going to compare our high school school report, hey, we have 36 APs that were offered or whatever it is, versus how many did our student take advantage of, and how did we do in those courses? What was the progression of grades? And then, what sometimes happens in number 2, which is the GPA of the core courses, many very selective schools will disaggregate the transcript and just pull out all the core courses, renorm everything to a 4.0 and judge students apples to apples. And then sometimes they get even more crazy, and then they'll start to look at their, students that they have in their campus who went to Lake Travis last year and look and see, okay, this student that we've accepted who's doing fine in our coursework here at Emory or wherever, how did that person's GPA look compared to this person who's at the same high school who's coming in through the admissions gates? So there's a lot of data analysis that happens in college admissions these days. The SAT and ACT, is it consistent with the GPA? Is there involvement? In which case is it deep and narrow, not wide and very thin? Do they have very well written essays? What are they saying? What are their character traits? Things of that nature. That really is what comes out of essays in this day and age. Leadership, initiative, diversity, which includes things like geographic diversity or ethnic diversity, strong recommendation letters, special talents and abilities, intellectual curiosity, evidences of character, values, and then finally demonstrated interest. We have a slide on that in a minute. So we also want to look at the most selective schools, because I know there's going to be a few people out there saying, yeah, I'm interested in MIT or Harvey Mudd or those kinds of schools. So there are 15 schools around the country that have the most selective admissions processes. We're talking 5-6% acceptance rates that have, about 250,000 applicants. They'll accept about 12,000, so it's virtually a lottery. And it's kind of heartbreaking in a lot of cases when I have really high flying students that have really all of the chops that are needed, a 3 or 4 page resume, the top scores, all that kind of good stuff. And when you rate their college list, you have to say, hey, it's still a stretch or it's a reach for you to look at these types of schools. That is the reality that we live in today. We also have to remember that these top schools are also looked at internationally, so there's lots of competition, not just here, but abroad as well. If you go just one layer below that into the near stratosphere, there are about 50 schools that will accept about 570,000 applications and accept through their doors only 40,000 students. So again, we're talking hyper competitiveness between 5 and maybe 15% acceptance ratios. So my advice here is look at these graphs, realize we may have the top ranked student like Travis, we may be the valedictorian, but there are 30,000 other valedictorians throughout the United States, quite literally. So we have to keep that in mind as we create this college list, be realistic. Okay, how to research the schools. The most important basics, visit the website of the college and the department webpage. It sounds basic, but many times I talk with students and they haven't done it yet. Check the metrics. Do I fit what they brought in last year? Look at the FISC guide. The FISC guide is a wonderful book that gives you a really nice overview of what's happening on campus. Definitely, there's tons of virtual tours now. Niche is a fantastic website that will give you a scatter plot, much like what Naviance does for those high schools that employ that, to help you understand really where you fit in their applicant pool. Collegeresults.org is a fantastic website for graduation rates and ROI, things of that nature. The NCS College Navigator website is my favorite website for searching for schools, just generally. So that's very nice. And then definitely do a net price calculation if you were concerned about the bottom line price of college for your family. And then visit. It's kind of upside down, right? I've had students come in and say, yeah, we visited Pepperdine and Duke and Yale and blah, blah, blah. And those are all great, but they had done much of this other groundwork first. So I really recommend flipping it and visit after you've done this kind of stuff. Once you do get to a visit, definitely prep for the visit, attend the admissions briefing, take a physical tour of campus. Actually, it's funny, I think about this. I actually went to Princeton for a campus tour once, and they gave the admissions briefing in the same classroom that Einstein used to teach in, which I thought was really cool. So take a physical tour of campus, ask students questions, not just the tour guide, people who are off the beaten path. Interview if you can, speak to a professor, attend a class if you can. If you're an athlete, definitely work out with a team and talk with a coach. Take a look at the outside community, take notes, because my guess is that you will do visitation over the course of maybe a year or two. And by the time you hit your 10th or 12th visit, that first visit is probably distant memory. If I can't visit,
Mike, we got another question. What are your thoughts on the U.S. News rankings?
Oh, great question. I don't put a lot of weight in that. Recently, Columbia got disranked or unranked because they were lying. I mean, there's so much pressure on colleges to self-report data that keeps them at the top of the rankings or propels them to the top of the rankings, that there's all sorts of stuff. I don't know. What's the saying, Emery? There's lies, data, blah, I forgot. It's not coming to me now, but basically there's so much pressure. I don't know of anyone who could say, hey, the difference between the number 2 and the number 15 business program at the undergraduate level is this, this, and this between these two schools. It's just not quantifiable in that way. So I don't love them. Most people in my profession don't love them either. The colleges don't love them.
And remember that information is self-reported. So that's not, I mean, it's not sussed out, it's not researched, it's them filling out a form and turning it in. And so they can pretty much say whatever they want to say. I would say it's a tool, but it's just one tool in the toolbox, right?
It's yeah,
take it with a grain of salt and
take it with a
compare
grain
it
of salt.
against all of the other data that you can get on that university.
That's right. That's right. It's like a mosaic piece. It's a little sliver of data. Okay. Great question, though. If I can't visit in person, there's lots of other ways to visit. Every college out there is going to have a virtual information session and tour on their website. The Texas Association of College Admissions Counselors also in the spring semester has a virtual college fair where hundreds of schools come together in a virtual setting, which is great. If you have questions about the school, contacting admissions, meaning the admissions rep who covers Texas or Austin, is a great way to get questions answered. It is also a great way of showing up, raising your hand and saying, hey, I am interested in Tulane. And guess what? If you're interested in Tulane, they want to know that you're interested in Tulane. They want to see, did you visit? Did you hit their website? Did you talk to the admissions rep, et cetera, ad nauseum?
And if I could add to that, that's the student reaching out to the universities, not the parent.
Great question. Yes, great point. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Demonstration of interest. This may or may not be out there in the lexicon of parents right now. I don't know, but in my industry, it definitely is out there. It's been there for a while. Here's a limited list of things that show up on colleges' radar as registering interest. And again, I don't want to portray that all colleges track demonstrated interest. Some don't at all. They don't care. Like the Ivy Leagues, they could care less if you're interested in them. But if you do look at some, schools that are tracking this, doing an early decision application is probably the #1 way of expressing your love, so to speak. That is the binding contract, the early decision one. Visiting campus is pretty darn powerful. You've taken time and resources to get to their campus. They've had a chance to woo you. That's great. They love it. Connecting with admissions reps, attending the college presentation at the high school, college fairs attendance, seeking additional information from their admissions website. Many of them have a button saying, hey, give me more info. They like it when you click that. Responding to emails, clicking in the links in the emails, that's kind of lower lying fruit. It doesn't take a lot to do that, so that may not register as high on the pecking order. When did we apply? Did we apply in the 11th hour, or did we do it early in the cycle? That can tell the school something. And then again, interviewing is kind of going by the wayside. I hate to say it, because it's really great to get an interview, but some schools just don't do it. Some schools are too big. And again, the admissions and the awarding of money is extremely data driven. I had a parent call me today asking about financial aid. Her son and daughter are at Duke and Harvard, respectively, and she is wanting to know, why does the CSS profile ask what kind of cars I drive and what year and how much I owe on them? That's because the awarding of money is extremely data driven, and they want to know all sorts of information about your family. And here I am going to pass the baton to my partner, Anne-Marie.
All right, so the different types of applications. Early decision is a binding contract. Early decision tells the university, if I apply and you let me in, I'm coming. Regardless of where else I get in or how much you cost, I'm still coming. We're not huge fans of early decision because that does limit our options to 1 or 2, depending upon whether or not you're looking at early decision 1 or early decision 2. I will say that we do work with a lot of recruited athletes, and sometimes the only way that the kid's going to be able to play football at Vanderbilt or tennis at Lehigh is to go early decision. So there's definitely reasons and rationales for doing that. Early action means that you apply by a particular date. In a lot of cases, November 1 of senior year. You apply by November 1 and they'll let you know whether or not you're in, usually by December 1 or January 1. Oops, Mike, you switched. I'm looking at your calendar now. There you go.
There you go. Sorry.
So you apply by November 1, you hear back usually by December 1 or January 1. instead of having to wait until the end of March, like all of the kids that apply regular decision. Rolling admissions is probably my favorite. Rolling admissions means the university will make a decision once they've received all of the pieces of the application package that are required by that school. So that's the application, the essay, the transcripts, the SAT, ACT scores, if we're not going test optional, et cetera. So a lot of our students that applied early August heard back by mid-August from a lot of schools that they got in. Most of those were on a rolling decision basis. Restricted early action, I would say, is kind of the worst of both worlds. Restricted early action means at a school like Stanford, for example, they're only going to allow you to apply to Stanford early action only. You can apply to other universities' regular decision, other private universities' regular decision, and some public universities' early action, but they are very restricted on that. And again, that's kind of the early decision without the extra help of getting into that particular school. There's lots of different ways to apply. The Texas Common App is called Apply Texas. Almost every school in Texas, with the exception of Rice and the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor, are on Apply Texas. And so if your student is only applying to schools in Texas, Apply Texas might be a good clearinghouse for applications for your student. The National Common App is becoming all the more popular. In fact, we were doing backflips and cartwheels this season when we found out that UT and A&M were going to be accepted on the Common App, because a lot of our kids will apply to other schools on the Common App, and they would have to go to Apply Texas just for UT and A&M, and now they can do them all on one application. The greatest thing about Apply Texas, about the Common App, and about the Coalition app, which I call kind of the new kid on the block, is they only make you fill out all of the common information once. So you put in your name, your address, your email, the classes you're taking as a senior, your extracurricular activities. You only have to enter all of that information once into each of these different pathways. Then you choose the schools that you want that information sent to, and then you answer all of the supplemental questions and write the supplemental essays that those colleges require. Some schools like MIT, for example, aren't on any of these clearinghouses. You have to go to that actual college's website to be able to apply to that particular school. So we try to help our students figure out the path of least resistance, you know, the way to do it with the least amount of data entry possible. So next slide for me, Mike. So speaking of essays, every school is going to have at least one main essay, and that essay is pretty short, 650 words or less. That's almost harder because now we have limited time to make our point. That's really 3 to 4 paragraphs, so it's not that long. You get a pretty big bang for your buck with this main essay, though, because you can usually use that one main essay across multiple universities. Almost every university is also going to require supplemental essays. Those are a lot shorter, 200 to 300 words. How do you show leadership in your life? What do you want to major and what you want to major in? Some are random. My favorite one here is define X. I mean, that's the whole essay prompt. And they expect the kid to write, 300 words about what X is. I also really like the Stanford one, write a note to your future roommate. There's a lot of information that universities are going to be able to gather from that type of information. So usually 2 to 3, like UT has 3 supplementals, 1 main essay, A&M has 1 main essay, 3 to 4 supplementals, depending upon what you're majoring in. So most kids are going to have to write lots of essays to get into college. Next. Lots of rules of thumb. Be an educated consumer. You're doing that by being here today. We encourage a top-down approach. Put all 2,406 four-year universities in the top of a funnel, and then filter it down based on your student's major and the criteria that's important to you and your family. As Mike mentioned, we encourage 8 to 10 universities. A million years ago when I went to UT Hookham, I applied to 3 schools. I got into 3 schools. we picked the cheapest one because I had a brother coming up the year after me. I wanted to go to Notre Dame. I got in, I got decent money, but it was cheaper to come to UT. And my dad said, "You are going to UT Austin." I said, "Okay." And off to Austin I came. We don't want your student to apply to 3 schools, get into 3 schools, and then they only have those 3 options. We really do encourage nice depth and breadth to your college list because they might change their mind. We had a student a couple of years ago dying to go to Missouri. She wanted to go to Mizzou, and she was going to Mizzou. She got in, she got good money to go there. And the closer she got to August, the more panicked she became because she was leaving home and her friends and everybody else. And she almost changed her mind. And so it was nice for us to have some backups for her. But I would always encourage you to apply to, kind of that 8 to 10 spot. There really is no substitute for a visit. Every school is different because it's a mix of different kids. The kids form the culture, and we want your student immersed in that culture, boots on the ground on campus while class is in session. If they get there and they hate it, off the list it goes, and let's move on to the next one, because they're going to have a lot of options. And if they're not happy, they're not going to do as well as they would if they're in an environment in which they could thrive. When you go to visit, if you are LD, stop by the support services. If you are planning on or hoping to play for that particular sports team, make sure you're chatting with the coach. Stop by the admissions office. Let's make sure you get credit for being there. And you want to make sure that the college is going to want your student before they actually apply. The easiest way to do that is go to Google and type in freshman class profile, 2022, the University of Texas. And it'll show you, the average GPA, the average SAT, ACT scores, etc. So really, really important to do that. And of course, before we even start looking at colleges, we need to think about how much money we want to spend as a family. We have a slide on the changes in the cost of college over the years. It really is shocking. And so it's important to start talking about a budget even before the student falls in love with NYU, which is $90,000 a year now, if you can believe that. Speaking of costs, these are all averages. I would say these are low in terms of Texas. The average public university across the United States, that includes like Iowa and Nebraska, is about 22. I'd say here in Texas, probably closer to 25. The average public university out of state is that's probably close. I'd say between 40 and 44, something like that. The average private university, probably 51 to 55. And then the average elite, is upwards of 75,000. Again, NYU is $90,000 this year. And these costs are going up 6 to 10% every year. And so, it's funny when I tell friends who are pregnant, you better start saving for college when the baby's still in the belly, because it is very expensive and it is on an upward trajectory. And that's just market economics. If Baylor was starting, their school year with an empty seat, they're not going to charge what they, that high of a rate. Speaking of the rise in cost, tuition and fees, since the late 70s has gone up over 1,200%. If you look at this, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index in the blue, that's what, 5 times that. Medical cost, everybody knows how much medical costs have gone up. That's almost double tuition and fees. And a lot of that is because people will pay for it. So next. Local college cost. I was talking about this slide just a second ago. Mike, in his brilliance in 2009, when he started College Inroads, took a snapshot of the prices of some of our local universities here. I just ran these numbers literally yesterday. So for last year, these are relevant prices. The thing that shocked me the most is Howard Payne increased 127%. That's crazy to me. Look at St. Ed's. They used to be the highest one. Howard Payne jumped a lot from 21 to 22, which is why there was that big of an increase. But Give some props to the University of Houston. They're only up 24% over those, 13 years, which is insanity. And then look at schools like TCU, Rice, and Baylor. They're all roughly the same amount of money. In fact, TCU is about $300 less, $250 less than Rice. But the quality of education between all three of those schools, could potentially be different. So really, really important for us to wrap our brains around how much it's going to cost for our students to go to university. And the most horrifying statistic is only 57% of all public university students will graduate within 6 years. 64% of all the students that start university this year will ever finish. And so that means roughly 4 out of 10 kids are never going to finish college. And that's horrifying to me. Now that begs the question, what do we do to lower our costs? Click for me. Who here wants scholarships? Says everybody always. Scholarships, those are offered by the university, but they are also offered here locally through the Lake Travis Education Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, etc. There is money out there. Dual credit programs. Dual credit means you get high school credit and college credit. So you don't necessarily have to take that history class again when you're at university. CLEP is probably not as popular as it used to be. CLEP is placing out over credit by examination. I actually did that when I went to university in the 80s. Max out that GPA, started a community college. Some of our kids need a bridge between high school and a 4-year university. Started a lower echelon school and transfer up. That has been probably more popular over the years, especially kids trying to get into UT. I will say that, most businesses don't care. I mean, when you graduate from the university, it doesn't matter where you started. It matters where you end. Demonstrated student interest. Mike talked a lot about that. Attend a less visible school for undergrad. Graduate school doesn't care where they go undergrad. They really don't. They care about the GPA, how well they do on the incoming standardized test, the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, etc. And so sometimes we can save a lot of money in undergrad and then save some money for graduate school. Believe it or not, you can appeal for more. You can appeal to the college and ask them for more money once you get those financial aid award letters. Be a shining star, max out the GPA. A lot of universities will still put a high dollar amount on higher GPAs or SAT scores, and pick the right school. That's probably should be number one, because that's critically important. Financial aid, 2 piles of money. Need-based aid is based on the family, income, assets, age of the oldest parent, how many kids you have in college at the same time. A good majority of our clients are not going to qualify for need-based aid, but the Texas legislature back in 2019 passed House Bill 3. One of the requirements in House Bill 3 is for each kid graduating from high school starting in 22 to prepare and submit a FAFSA in order to get their diploma if they're planning on going to college. And so the Texas legislature has made it a requirement. There's really no downside to filing FAFSA, even if we're not going to qualify for aid. Sometimes it's a good idea for the school to know that you have the financial wherewithal to be able to pay for college. And when you prepare and submit a FAFSA for your student, they're automatically going to qualify for what's called a Stafford loan, which is a student loan in the kid's name only. It does give them helps them develop good credit when they're in college, and it also gives the kids some accountability. Not that they'll need it, but does give them some accountability. So need-based aid is based on the family's income. Merit-based aid is based on the student. Grades, GPA, class rank, extracurricular activities, talent will take you places academics never will. And even if you don't qualify for need-based aid, if you pick the right universities, you'll probably be in a good position to qualify for merit-based aid. Next slide. A couple of important questions. I am knee-deep in financial aid forms with our clients right now, so this is top of mind for me. When do we file? FAFSA and the CSS financial aid profile open October 1 of senior year. The FAFSA is a more cursory look at your financial situation. All they really want to see is your tax return and your taxable assets, any liquid assets you have, checking, savings, and then any taxable assets like stock accounts that are not in retirement, for example. The CSS financial aid profile is a much deeper dive into your financial situation, and they want everything. Both of those forms do a 2-year look back, and that's from the year of graduation. So if you have a student that's graduating in 2024, anything that happens this calendar year, 2022, on your tax return is going to affect your FAFSA. If you have a 25 graduate, they're going to look at the tax return from 23, et cetera. So it's a 2-year look back. I make too much money and to get any aid, should I file anyway? I talked a little bit about that. In Texas, it's required, although there is an opt-out system. There's no downside to filing financial aid forms, so I would say absolutely yes, you should file anyway. And yes, you can actually do a dry run. You can go to FAFSA Forecaster, FAFSA, the number 4 caster, and type in some of your information, and it'll give you an idea of what your expected family contribution could potentially be. So next slide. All right, this is most people's favorite part of our presentations. These are the timelines. So if you have a freshman or kids that are 8th or 7th grade, we need to be looking at course selection. Freshman year matters. It really does. And a lot of kids don't realize the importance of freshman year. That is a third of the transcript. And so it's important that we pick the right courses, that we maximize our grades. They do matter. Freshman year is also a really good time to start developing those foundational skills, the study habits, the time management, et cetera, that are going to help them, juggle school and sports or band and work and sleep and, all of that. We really schedule our kids within an inch of our lives any longer. Let's start looking at some extracurricular activities. A million years ago when I went to university, they wanted well-rounded. So I did 9 million different things. Anymore, they want you to pick a couple and show passion and deep involvement in these activities. So freshman year and prior is a really good time to figure out, what am I really passionate about? If you don't know, that's fine. Let's do some research. Let's join a couple of clubs. Let's look around and see where we feel like we could spend our time. And leadership and community service, if you have a really smart student and they apply for the National Honor Society, they're going to require leadership and community service. So let's make sure that we get that started in the pipeline really early. Foreign language, a lot of our kids are taking at least starting foreign language in the 7th and the 8th grade. To graduate, you need 2 years. A lot of universities like to see 3 years. And so let's start in the 8th grade and then continue that on through sophomore year. Start planting the seeds by going to some college fairs, doing a walk around Texas State or UT or Southwestern or St. Ed's. We have so many universities close to the Austin area. We have so many options, but especially if your student's not really hot on going to college quite yet, sometimes putting them in that college environment will help to start plant some seeds and get them thinking about what their life really could be like in just a couple of years. And then the Coalition app has a locker. So if they get any letters of recommendation from camps that they went to, or any graded papers that they got A+ on, they can stick that in the locker. And sometimes you can use those in your college applications. Next. Sophomores, we want to develop our focus. Again, course selection and grades are as important. Again, that's a third of the transcript is the sophomore year. Again, deep involvement in extracurricular activities. Pick a couple and focus. Again, we want to focus on that leadership and community service. The PSAT 10 is actually happening tomorrow. So if you have a sophomore, they'll be taking the PSAT tomorrow. That one really is a practice. In fact, it's a marketing event for the College Board. So if you start to get lots of mail or your kid starts to get a lot of email, it's because of that. A lot of emails from universities, it's because of that. Again, do some informal visits, start to look at some college fairs, and then the summer prior to the junior year, we always encourage you to prep for the PSAT. Any prep you do on the PSAT is going to help with the SAT, ACT. Because once you take the PSAT after the National Merit Scholarship qualifying exam in junior year, nobody cares about the PSAT ever again. And then we shift focus to SAT or ACT. Next. Juniors, we are refining our focus. I would say almost all of the heavy lifting happens junior year. We want to continue to achieve in the classroom, again, the last third of the transcript. After junior year, we cannot affect change to our transcript because the transcript that gets your student into university, freshman, sophomore, junior year, it's called the 6th semester transcript. Some universities will ask for grades from the first semester of senior year, but most universities are just going to use the 6th semester transcript. We need to start thinking about what we want to major in, because when we fill out college applications, usually in the summer of between junior and senior year, they are going to require you to pick a major. Now, you can go undecided. That still is a thing. It's not as popular as it used to be in the day, but if your student really is good at everything and you really can't decide, then going undecided is an option. We want to do an in-depth college search and pair that with research. Even though we think we might want to go to a school like UT, we need to research to make sure that's really going to be the place for us. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Texas, but my freshman chemistry 301 class had 700 kids in it. I was used to being a big fish in a small pond, and I was a speck of sand on the beach at UT. And so I had a really hard time my first year and a half. Had I known, I might have chosen to go elsewhere. I ended up having a great experience, but it was tough that first year and a half for me. I didn't do my research, and that's the issue. Start writing essays. Again, the kids are going to have multiple essays to write. We don't want to try to jam this whole process into the first semester of senior year when they already have too much other stuff going on. We need to polish our resume. Let's do some practice for interviews. I would also encourage at Lake Travis, we have admissions reps coming to our high school every week. And so look on the counselor's calendar online, and if the schools are coming to visit that your student's interested in, I would encourage them to go and meet with them, get the pass, and bring a resume. So nice to meet you. Here's my resume. Even if that's all you get to say to that person, that resume is going back with them to their office and gets uploaded into their database. And that's one way of expressing interest as well. Prep for your standardized test. Please do not go in cold to these standardized tests, because maybe you're only going to take it once. And we want to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck with that SAT or ACT score. Visit colleges, do some tours. In fact, I would argue if you go to tour now, I would also go visit after you've been accepted, because it's a different set of criteria. It's a different filter through which you're evaluating these universities once you've been accepted. When you go now, it's maybe. When you go after you've been accepted, that potentially is going to be your reality. And that's a different set of criteria. And then prep for your financial aid. That's really important too. Next. Seniors, time to execute. I would say we're probably cooked. Finalize the college list, continue with the college visits. Make sure that the teachers that you ask for letters of recommendation at the end of your junior year are actually writing them and are going to get them in on time. Finalize your essays and short answers. A lot of those supplemental essays won't even open until August 1. And so a lot of kids are still writing, supplemental essays into the beginning of the senior year. Interview if that's an option. Make sure that you're completing your college applications. A lot of the early action deadlines are coming up November 1, and a good majority of our kids are done with at least some, if not most, of their applications at this point. Make sure that once you submit the application and the essays, that you are also sending your SAT, ACT scores if you are not going test optional. You also have to send all of your transcripts, including UT on-ramps and ACC if you are claiming those dual credits. You want to keep in conversation with that admissions rep. And again, October, I would encourage you to start thinking about applying for a financial aid, the FAFSA, the CSS financial aid profile. Some schools like Princeton, for example, have their own financial aid forms. Those are called institutional forms. Apply for scholarships. Again, you'll get scholarships. You'll be in the line to qualify for scholarships when you apply. But there are also other scholarships out there, local scholarships, international scholarships, etc. And then appeal. Again, in some cases, not every case, but in some cases, college tuition is negotiable. And you do that through the appeals process. You appeal to the university at the end of the process for more money, and sometimes they'll give it to you, sometimes not, usually not. But the answer to the question is always going to be no unless you ask it. So you might as well put it out there. There's no harm for that. Next. Good news, we're done. So what do we do next? We need to do some college research. We need to make sure that we are on top of these timelines. Consider visiting, doing some virtual activities, getting to know your admissions rep. Definitely determine and have a conversation with your students about your budget. Again, we don't want to fall in love with NYU at $90,000 if the parents either don't want to or can't pay for that. And so it's important to get that budget conversation front and center at the very beginning. And then meet with us. We do offer a free consult. This webinar has been very general in nature. In that free consult, we can get very specific with you regarding your family situation. And finally, a tip on what not to do. Please don't stick your head in the sand. It is coming, whether or not you want it to. Your students are reaching the age of having to go through this process and go to college and, spread their wings and fly. Next. This is kind of a slide on what we do. We are educational consultants. We help high school students and their parents with the entire process of getting into college. Realistically, the only thing we don't do is college visits, although we don't write your essays for you and we don't fill out your applications for you, but we do provide a lot of help and support and guidance. The students do the work. We're here to manage, direct, steer, cajole, bring them back on track if they're off track. They do the work, we're here to support, but it really is targeted and individualized college prep for your student. Next slide. And then if you're interested in having a free consult with us, please make sure you're taking a picture of the slide, reach out to us. Anna, our salesperson, is excited and more than happy to speak with all of you. So please reach out. We would love the opportunity to chat with you and potentially help you save some time, stress, and money on the crazy road to college. Thanks for attending. We're so glad that we have the opportunity to do this twice a year with the PTO. We really value the relationship that we have with our Lake Travis High School PTO. So thanks for your time.
Yes, thank you for attending. We hope this is really helpful for you. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional questions. And certainly you can email over to Anna if you'd like to get a copy of the slides from this evening. We'd be very happy to send those. If you'd like to stick around, we'll be answering any questions that you'd like to answer. There were a few questions as we went through, but I know that we had to go at lightning speed. So yes, the last question was, can you please email the attendees the slide deck? Very good, but it's hard to take notes. You can totally get it. So yes.
If you'll just reach out to Anna or info@collegeinroads.com if you're interested in getting the slides, we're more than happy to present them to you. Happy to do that. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Okay, I don't see many others, so
going twice. All right, well, thanks so much everybody for being here.
Have a great night all.
Thanks guys.
Bye-bye.